Very little is known about his birth and early childhood, except for the information that he himself had declared. He was born into slavery on October 6, 1767, on the then British-ruled Caribbean island of Grenada. His mother was enslaved on the island, and his father, Christophe, had somehow obtained his freedom and was considered a free man sometime during the previous 114-year French rule of the island. Although his father was free, his son was not born into freedom. This is because of a long-held legal practice practiced throughout Europe, that the children of enslaved women were born enslaved themselves. In other words, that which is born of the womb follows the womb. This practice also conveniently helped perpetuate the system of slavery through the maternal line and maintain the enslaved labor force which upheld the economic structure of colonial plantation economies. At some point later in his childhood, the son obtained his freedom. There are two versions about what happened next in the young boy's life. One version is that his father, probably realizing the limited opportunities for his freed black son, other than to labor in the fields working, quite frankly, for individuals who were your previous enslavers, sold the services of his son to a French ship captain to work as a cabin boy. The other version is that the French admiral who gained control of Grenada in 1779 took the young boy with him when he departed the island on August 16, 1779, probably to have him serve as a drummer boy on his new assignment during the American Revolutionary War at the Siege of Savannah in 1779. The boy would have served with a mixed-race military regiment from Saint Dominique, now Haiti. That regiment lost 168 soldiers, and it is rumored that the boy was one of the 411 who were wounded during the siege. Regardless of the version of his departure from Grenada, the young boy eventually ended up in Saint Dominique. His name was Henry Christophe, and he was probably around 12 years old at the time of his departure from Grenada. Being a free person, he was able to work in a variety of jobs in Saint Dominique that were typically closed to enslaved people, but open to freedmen. He worked variously as a mason, sailor, waiter, and other odd jobs. Around the time of Christophe's arrival in Saint Dominique, there were major transformative events that significantly influenced the island. They were driven by a combination of long-standing grievances, social and political inequalities, revolutionary ideas from abroad, and subversive ideas from within. These included brutal conditions endured by the enslaved on the island, who comprised almost 90% of the population, escalating racial tensions on the island between wealthy white planters, poor whites, mulattoes, and freed blacks who, despite being free, were not accorded the same privileges as whites. The French Revolution of 1789 to 1799, with its motto of liberty, equality, fraternity, inspired many of the enslaved throughout the French colonies to rise up and demand their freedom. The voodoo ceremony of 1791, where Bookman Dutty, an enslaved person, inspired his fellow enslaved people to revolt against slavery. His leadership precipitated a slave rebellion and the mass destruction of plantations and the deaths of a large number of whites. This is the environmental milieu that confronted Christophe in Saint Dominique, and no doubt prompted him to join the slave uprising that eventually transformed into a revolutionary war led by Toussaint Louverture, a former slave. Toussaint's revolutionary army was comprised of enslaved people who abandoned the plantation to join the revolution, and the mulattoes who were dissatisfied with their status as free but unequal. The revolutionary army formed an alliance with the Spanish, joined with France when France abolished slavery in 1793, then fought against the French forces when Napoleon decided to reinstitute slavery. The intrigues and nuances of war, with its many adversaries, alliances, and internal rivalries, required discipline, bravery, commitment, tactical knowledge, and loyalty. Christophe evidently possessed all of those characteristics, despite the fact that he was illiterate. He rose quickly through the ranks to become one of the top 3 military commanders in Toussaint's army. In 1802, he sent his 10-year-old son to study in France at a school that had educated blacks, whites, and mixed-race children together. Unfortunately, it was just at the time that Napoleon was looking to reinstate slavery in the French colonies. The boy was placed in an orphanage and worked as a security guard. He died there at the age of 12. When French forces landed in the city of Le Cap with over 30,000 troops in 1802, Christophe burned the city in order to deprive them of a safe haven. Months later, he surrendered his troops to the French on the promise that he and his officers would maintain their rank and be incorporated into the French army. This action eventually forced all the other regiments to follow suit. Of course, the French had no intention of keeping their word. Toussaint was deceived into meeting with a French general. He was captured and exiled to France, where he died later. With widespread rumors that slavery will be re-established, Christophe deserted the French army and rejoined the Revolutionary Army commanded by Jean-Jacques Dessalines, another of Toussaint's top commanders. They continued the guerrilla warfare with the French army. The war was long and bloody, and grave atrocities were committed on both sides. In 1803, the Revolutionary Army was able to humiliate and defeat the seemingly overwhelming forces of Napoleon, and in 1804, Dessalines declared Saint-Dominique an independent republic and renamed it Haiti, and himself emperor. Haiti thus became the first black independent country in the Western Hemisphere. Christophe was put in control of the northern part of Haiti, and Alexandre Pétion, a mulatto commander, was put in charge of southern Haiti. In 1806, Dessalines was killed in a battle trying to suppress a revolt, and in 1807, Christophe was appointed president of the northern region, a mostly ceremonial role. Pétion is appointed president of the southern region with significantly more authority than Christophe. Later that year, Christophe led a failed coup against Pétion. On March 28, 1811, Christophe declared Haiti a kingdom and proclaimed himself king. Pétion refused to have his mostly mulatto region incorporated into the new kingdom run by a black man, and the relationship between the two regions remained strained until Pétion's death in 1818. As king, Christophe had 3 major priorities. First was to keep the kingdom safe from further attacks by France. As a result, he built an enormous fortress named the Citadel, and he made an agreement with the British to warn him of any potential attacks by France. He also distributed plantations to his military officers to maintain their loyalty. His second priority was to improve the education of the masses and restore the economy after years of fighting and destruction. In that regard, he created new schools and brought in teachers from abroad. He also instituted a system of forced labor in order to rebuild the lucrative sugarcane economy and support his many grandiose plans and extravagant lifestyle. The system of forced labor was very unpopular and created much resentment and unrest in the kingdom. Forced labor was technically not slavery, but to his subjects, it was probably hard for them to tell the difference. His third priority was to establish for himself and his family a lasting legacy and restore discipline and order amongst his newly freed subjects. On this matter, he created a nobility consisting of princes, dukes, counts, barons, etc. He gave the title of Prince Royal of Haiti to one of his sons, and he also built an enormous palace named Sans Souci, where he lived with his wife and daughters. He micromanaged almost every aspect of his subjects' life, including marriage and dress code. He made Catholicism the state religion, and oftentimes meted out punishments himself. On August 15, 1820, in the midst of growing unrest due to his forced labor policies and despotic rule, Christophe suffered a stroke and is partially paralyzed. The news of his paralysis results into looting and revolts. He is now vulnerable and unable to fully depend on his troops to lead them to quell the revolts and also protect himself against those who may be plotting against him. Realizing the extent of his weakness to effect change and the jeopardy of his situation, on October 8, 1820, he informed his family of the dire state of affairs and then sent them off. Next, he had his attendants dress him in his military uniform before dismissing them. He then shot himself with a silver bullet in his Sanssouci palace. He was 53 years old. With fear and confusion escalating wildly, his wife and a few loyal servants quickly removed the body from the palace and buried it in a pile of quicklime in the citadel. His son, the heir apparent, was assassinated 10 days after his death. Christophe's death marked an ignoble and inglorious ending for a historic figure that began in slavery and rose to fight Napoleon's army and liberate a country from the tyranny of slavery. 27 years after his death, Christophe was finally properly laid to rest in the citadel he had built.